Hi, in this video I'll be walking you through one of the ways you can set up the Hoops Communicator server component. The key points we'll touch on in this video are various ways of running Hoops Communicator, demonstrating setting up and running the streaming server in standalone mode, and finally we'll be discussing a few topics related to the various server modes. You may remember from a previous video that Communicator can be set up to run with or without a server. When running without the server, the viewer loads a file directly via an asynchronous call. When using the streaming server, however, you have the choice to use our built-in service broker application or manage the server instances from your application, what we call viewer standalone mode. Standalone mode is only applicable to applications that are using the server. The developer has full control over how the server application runs. You control which IP, port, connection timeout, etc. that the server instance starts up with. The built-in service broker is not needed when running in this configuration. Now we're going to jump into a quick walkthrough where we'll do the following. Run the settings builder, run the server with our settings files, and then connect to the server instance. Finally, we'll review the code that connects to the server instance. I've got my package open here where I've extracted it with the Communicator package, and inside of the server folder we have a folder called settings builder. This is a small application that we built that interactively asks you some questions and creates some settings files for you once it's all finished. So in this case, you can see we can start from three different ways. Development mode, which would build a standalone package for us with a service broker, a little small web server, and everything that can run on a single machine. This is good for developers, and it doesn't take any configuration other than running this and to get started. Distributed mode would be if you were going to use the service broker, but you wanted to run the streaming instances on different machines, and this might be for scaling, or depending on how your infrastructure is set up, you may want to run the service broker on one machine and streaming servers on another machine, so on and so forth. And then the last is the viewer standalone mode, which we're going to do. I'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger here for you so you can see. There we go. So we're being asked to enter the IP address of the interface that we want to bind to. On this machine, we'll just use the local IP address, but this could be the IP address of your EC2 instance or of the container that you're going to be using, and this can be you can create a template settings file here, and you can change that settings file dynamically when you're running on the server. So this would be, do we want our IP addresses to show up in the URI, or maybe a domain name, a DNS name? For this instance, we're just going to use the IP addresses, but in production you would most likely use your DNS name. And we're going to use the public name if it's different. Some machines may have multiple IP addresses. In this case, we're all the same. We're all one IP address on my development machine. And then this is going to be, where do we want to store log files from the output of the stream from the streaming server. This one, you might want to put this to like an NFS share, or if it's going to be an EC2 instance that's not going to go away after the streaming server shuts down, you can store it on that machine somewhere. But just keep in mind, if you're running this on a container, that generally after the container shuts down, those things may go away. I'm going to use the default here as well. And now we're being asked, where do we want to pull our model files from? For this exercise, I've already set up a small little location that mirrors something that might be set up on a web server. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to set that as my directory that I want to load my models from. And if you saw, I had models directory in here. So in this case, I've got one stream cache file prepared in here. Go ahead and run that. And you can do multiple directories. In this case, we'll just skip. We're not going to configure SSL for this exercise. And then the server working directory, in this case, I'll do the same file as I did earlier, basically the root of my application. And then here we would put in our license key, and then we want to tell it where we would like to output our files. So I'll output them in this directory and in a folder called output. And then that's all we really need to do. So that is an application that creates some settings files for you. And let's see what we did. So we have output here, and we just created these files. So if we look at here, let's have a quick look at what's in here. It's an XML file. It would have your license key in here. It would have all of the things you specified inside of that, or when you were answering the questions there. And what's nice, and now this is a template file that you'll use when running your server in Standalone at the SC Server app, and you can change these as needed, and you don't need to run that application again. Great. So now what do we have here? We've got this file set up here. We've got a little HTML file that's going to connect to it. So the next thing we need to do now is run the SC Server app. So inside, let's come back here real quick to the server. We go to bin. You'll see we've got the server and the SC Server app. The server is the full application that runs with the service broker and everything. The standalone version is SC Server app. So I'm going to run that here now. So I've already run this application earlier, and I have my license key set up, but all I did is copy my settings file that I want to run into this application. That's not necessarily, you can run them, you can specify the path to your settings file, but in this case I just put them right alongside the binary. You'll notice I've also specified the port I want this instance to run on, as well as the HTTP port. This port right here will be the port that is connected to. So if we launch multiple SC Server apps, we'll have to specify different ports to connect to. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to run it, and you can see now it's started up and it's listening on this IP address with this port that I specified using my settings files that we passed in. So this will time out by default in about a minute. You can change that with some command line arguments, but for this exercise it's not going to be necessary. Now we're going to move on and run the simple application here. So what we have here is a small little web application, and all we're doing here is we've loaded the viewer, and we're using Bootstrap for some JavaScript other things, and then we're going to start the viewer up right here. And what you'll see is I'm specifying localhost in this case, but this could be the IP address of the instance we just started up, as well as the port that we're going to connect to, and then the model that I want to load from my model directory. So we're going to do that now. I'm actually running a real small web server here out of this directory because we need to be able to serve up this page, and I'm going to listen on port 8000. So now if we come here and we go to localhost 8000, you'll see we got a connection over here. That file that started up, and it's going to connect to over here, which I waited too long, so that we'll start that again, and we'll reload this now. And now we're going to connect here to the running application that's not timed out this time, and we loaded the file. So very simple way to start your own instance and then connect directly to it. And as I mentioned earlier, it times out after about a minute. And then also, once the WebSocket connection is closed, so once the user leaves or something, the process ends. Now that we've completed the walkthrough, you should know a few things. Running in standalone mode allows your application to control the server instances. The service broker is a good tool for development and small installs, but it's less flexible than controlling the streaming instances directly. The standalone server works well with container technology such as Docker. We've designed the streaming app to shut down when the connection is closed, which will then trigger the container to shut down. This allows your application to quickly and easily scale up or down. Thanks for watching this video, and see the server documentation for more details.